Hello everybody, welcome to Quarantine Cooking. I'm Claire and this is the show where we can all cook together separately. Today we have an eclectic menu to honor one of the most eclectic people that I know, my dad. We're going to start out with Spanakopita, then a layered salad with a creamy sesame dressing, and for dessert, pumpkin pie.
Everyone knows it's windy. Who's tripping down the streets of the city, smiling at everybody she sees? Who's reaching out to capture a moment? Everyone knows it's windy. And windy has stormy eyes that flash at the sound of lies. And windy has wings to fly above the clouds, above the And windy has stormy eyes that flash at the sound of lies. And windy has wings to.
Our oven is preheating at 350 degrees and I'm going to show you how to start out our pumpkin pie. This is an incredibly easy, delicious ginger snap crust. I'm using these Biscoff Lotus cookies, which have more of a cinnamon flavor to them rather than ginger, but you can use ginger snaps, you can use graham crackers, and then it's also going to be combined with toasted pecans. So go ahead and put in about 9 ounces of cookies in your food processor and grind them up till they're like a fine sand. Then add 1 heaping cup of toasted pecans. You know, it can be walnuts, almonds. I just like the little bit of nuttiness. In any cookie crust, I like the combination, so it's not overly sweet, especially if you have a really sweet, luscious filling like we're gonna have. Just till the nuts are nice and evenly distributed. And then I have a little mix of cardamom and ginger here. I like it really gingery, so you don't have to put this in. But you could put cinnamon or whatever spice you like. I love cardamom and ginger, so that's what I'm doing. And I also think that cardamom and pumpkin go really beautifully together. And my dad has always loved ginger. We're a ginger family. I think that either are or you're not, kind of like black licorice. And we're all of it, black licorice, ginger. 2 tablespoons sugar, 2 tablespoons flour. Just right in there. And a little pinch of salt. Yeah, just to balance out the flavor. About a 1/4 teaspoon. And then after we blend this all up, we're going to be adding a 1/2 cup of either melted butter or in this case I'm using coconut oil. So 1/2 cup of coconut oil. Just drizzle your oil in. And then this should be about the texture then of wet sand and just slightly start to come together. And then I have a 9-inch springform pan instead of a pie plate, but this would be enough crust for 2 pumpkin pies. So if you want to just stay modest and make 1, we'll cut the recipe in half. A lot of pumpkin pie is just better, so I wanted to make a bigger one. You can also make this recipe in a cast iron skillet and it's really good. The crust gets super crunchy. So just gently, so I have this lined with parchment and then also covered with aluminum just to prevent any leakage. And I cut my round of parchment just a little bit bigger than the bottom because I'm gonna be pressing the crust up on the sides. I'm a crust-liking lady. Doesn't really matter if it's not traditional pumpkin spice pumpkin pie time in our family. My dad, it's his favorite, so even when it was Father's Day in June, we would always have pumpkin pie. And that's kind of why I am doing this menu today, is what I remember always being what my mom would make for Father's Day. And after so many years of always focusing on like, well, what goes together? This makes sense with that. Sometimes it's fun to just enjoy a meal of all of your favorite things, even if they absolutely don't go together, because they're all going to be really delicious. So I'm patting this out about 1/2 inch, and then just maybe 3/4 of an inch up the sides. And I'm going to pop this in the oven for 10 minutes and then take it out and let it cool completely before adding our filling. So I'll pop this in and I'll show you how to make that filling. So this is how we're going to make our luscious pumpkin pie filling. Starting with a whole can, 29 ounces of pumpkin. Go ahead and it makes it really easy, just put it all in a blender. Or if you want to wash out your food processor and blend it in, that works good too. So go ahead and put this in. Oop. The first time that I ever made pumpkin pie for my dad, as I mentioned, it was tradition that he would have that on Father's Day, and I was 13 and my mom was visiting family in Lebanon. My dad took my brother and I, and we're going to put 2 cups of full fat coconut milk. My dad took my brother and I up to our family cabin, and so it fell upon my shoulders to make pumpkin pie for the first time for Father's Day. And I forgot the sugar, so I'm pretty positive this is going to go better than that. And to this, we're going to add 2/3 cup of plant-based yogurt, 1/3 cup bourbon, and then I've played around with a lot of different egg replacers. This is my first time using this one too, so we'll see how it works out. So we're going to do 1/2 cup of egg replacer, which is roughly the equivalent of 4 eggs. We're going to gently blend all this before we add the rest of our goodies.
I know, fella.
It already smells so good. So you can use dried ginger. I use about a teaspoon or 2, but I'm using fresh because, as I stated before, we are a ginger kind of family. And if you haven't already figured this out, I hadn't till a couple years ago, you can just peel ginger with a spoon. And if you use organic ginger and have a high-powered blender, you can just throw it in without peeling it too. So about a tablespoon of fresh, or 2. Yeah. 2 teaspoons of cinnamon, a 1/2 teaspoon of nutmeg, 1/2 teaspoon of allspice, and about a teaspoon of kosher salt. And 1.5 cups of brown sugar. Very important, because then it, tastes like a sweet pie instead of a weird squash pie that I made. My dad was so sweet though. One of his favorite parts of pumpkin pie is just an absurd amount of whipped cream on it. So he still ate that whole pie, just you couldn't see the pie underneath all the whipped cream. And blend all this up.
Goofy girl.
Right. And because there's no raw eggs in this, you can just go ahead and good quality control. Our crust is out of the oven and is cooled. You can just, the ginger at the end of that is so perfect. All right, and you can just pour that in. My brother and I were really lucky that my dad was the one that got to stay home with us, and my mom worked hard every day at the community center. And so when we were growing up, it was a really amazing experience to get to, and not always that common to have your dad be the one that was the stay-at-home parent. Now it's different, and everybody can be a Renaissance person if they want to, or be a working parent, or be all of the above, so it's great. But my dad was kind of groundbreaking at that time, and it was a wonderful and lucky thing to have such a positive male role model as a young woman. All you guys out there, be positive role models. And all you women too, everybody. I have some crystallized ginger to make a beautiful decoration on top. And you can do that if you want, or you could do a little bit of cinnamon, or just leave it in its pristine state. And I make little strips. Maybe do a little sunburst. I think that would be beautiful. Or maybe more like crop circles.
It's a big old goofy world.
We're gonna put this in the oven. Oven's still at 350 degrees. And I would check it after about 45 minutes, but it's a pretty wet dough or batter, so it's probably gonna take around an hour.
Baby, it's a big old goofy world.
So to start our Spanakopita filling, I have a large pot that I'm heating up on high heat and adding just a tablespoon or two of olive oil to wilt the massive amount of greens that it takes to even make 2 little handfuls. So this is 2 pounds of green. Frozen spinach at the store works well too. Just make sure you completely thaw it and then drain it really well. That's the key. After we steam and wilt our greens, you want to drain and squeeze it so you don't get too wet of a filling, and our layers of phyllo dough stay really light and crispy and buttery. So I start putting in the greens, and then with some good tongs that are long enough so you stay safe, just kind of keep turning them. Okay, go ahead and turn your heat off once there's just maybe 1 or 2 little unwilted bits, but all your greens have gotten into the pot and cooked down. Go ahead and just put your greens in a strainer. It's getting steamy. Hopefully you guys can still see. And just set this aside and we'll make the rest of our filling, and then you're gonna be taking handfuls of these greens once they're all cold and squeezing them as hard as you can to get all that moisture out. So in a large skillet, I have a 1/2 cup of plant-based butter melted. And after your pan and your butter are nice and hot, add 3 cups of finely chopped onions. And mine have a nice little blush to them because they shared a cutting board with some sliced beets. But you want them pretty finely chopped. And then these are going to be sauteing for anywhere from 10 to 15 minutes, just till they're all lightly golden brown. And we're going to add 2 teaspoons of kosher salt. And then just keep your eye on it and stir occasionally, but you want a lot of the moisture to evaporate, so keep the heat on your pan pretty high. So our onions have nice little crispy kisses on some of the edges. Into this, we're going to add a heaping cup of finely chopped artichoke hearts. And these are marinated. And then 5 cloves of garlic. And I just put the artichoke hearts and the garlic right in the food processor and ground it up together. So 5 cloves garlic, 1 heaping cup marinated artichoke hearts, right with the onions. And a bunch of scallions, which ended up being about 1.5 cups, both the white and the green parts. And you want to turn your heat down just a little bit at this point to about medium-high. And this will cook 5 to 8 minutes, just until that real assertive raw garlic smell has left the pan and, well, in my case, perfumed your hair. Okay, so our scallions, our garlic, our artichoke hearts, and our onions have all cooked down together. I'm going to turn the heat off on our skillet and add 2 tablespoons of dried oregano, 1 tablespoon of lemon zest. Give that a stir, and I like adding these when there's still some residual heat without it being too aggressive, because it'll help bring the lemon oils out of our zest and rehydrate our oregano. Then 1 teaspoon each of white and black pepper. Again, adding it when there's some residual heat are going to help bring those amazing aromatic oils out. 1/4 cup of finely chopped dill. 1 cup of finely chopped fresh parsley. And 1/2 cup of finely chopped mint. And just gently stir all this in. It smells so good. And we're gonna let this all cool down, and I'll show you how to make the rest of our delicious filling. So we have our sauteed onion mixture all cooled down, and our 2 pounds of greens have now been squeezed with gumption into about 2 cups of very densely packed and cooled in this bowl. We'll set those aside because first we need to make our delicious creamy element, which is going to be 2 cups of roasted and salted macadamia nuts. And you can also use pine nuts or Brazil nuts. I would just choose, or even cashews, just a more mild but really high fat content nut, because that's going to kind of replicate usually the 3 different kinds of cheese that you would put in Spanakopita. 1/3 cup of white miso, 1 cup of plain unsweetened vegan yogurt, and then 1/2 cup of nutritional yeast. And all of these elements are going to really help replicate the fatty mouthfeel of putting in the feta or the ricotta or the parmesan that you would normally put in Spanakopita. Just go ahead and blend that up till the macadamia nuts are pretty pulverized, and it should almost look like ricotta cheese. So really quick, I am very lucky that I had 2 parents that encouraged me to always just be learning, be a lifelong learner, educate yourself so we can be better patrons of the universe. One of the things that I have learned that I wanted to share is using umami powder, or you might know it as monosodium glutamate. There's been a lot of myths that have been dispelled in the last 5 years that now make it so we can make really yummy, super umami-rich foods at home. As you may know, there's bitter, salty, sweet, and, acid. And now the 5th taste, umami, which is kind of like a real savory, almost meaty quality. And the 2 most umami-rich things are, first, kombu seaweed, and second is Parmesan. So it's important that maybe something that would have like a cup of Parmesan in it, to use this as a great flavor aid. And like I said, it just comes from fermenting starches and sugar together. It's a natural occurring process that happens in like yogurt, soy sauce. 1 tablespoon of apple cider vinegar and 1 tablespoon of white vinegar. And this is going to add that tang. And a little more tang, because feta is pretty tangy. So 1/4 cup of fresh squeezed lemon juice, 1/2 teaspoon of fresh grated nutmeg. And if you use pre-ground nutmeg, I recommend using more of like probably a whole teaspoon. That's our pumpkin pie. We'll get to her later. And then blend this up, and we're going to add 2 tablespoons of potato starch just to make sure everything is really cohesive and doesn't leak out all over the place in our little savory pockets. subtle taste. You can add a little more salt or maybe more pepper. Wow, that is like flavor up the wazoo. Okay, so good. Then we're gonna combine that along with our delicious onion and herbs and our greens in a large bowl. I'm very passionate about informing myself and the people I love on, you know, current culinary politics. So another interesting thing about monosodium glutamate is that it was invented by a Japanese chemist who was eating ramen and had the delicious savory broth, and he just wanted to be able to replicate that a little quicker. So he invented how to make MSG by just using the same bacteria that you would when you make yogurt or wine or beer, and adding it to either beet sugar or cane sugar, and then you get this perfect little white sprinkle that, just like you would use salt sparingly or sugar, you can just add that and have what would taste like a broth that's been cooking like 48 hours and just pretty quick. And especially when it comes to plant-based cuisine, sometimes when you use different sources of umami, so we have our miso, we have our wonderful our lemon zest. So if you don't have that or you don't want to use umami powder, you could just add maybe a teaspoon of soy sauce or a little more miso, maybe a little sprinkle of sugar, and it should kind of replicate what's going on. Just stir that up, and I'll show you how to brush and fill our phyllo pockets and make our perfect Spanakopita triangles. So I have one package of phyllo, and it came in 2 little rolls, and it's about 40 sheets. And if you haven't worked with phyllo dough before, it's a really fine wheat pastry that usually is used in a lot of Mediterranean dishes, and it makes just incredible casing for delicious things like baklava, or you can even use it instead of making pie crust for quiche. But you do need to get used to it, and it can be frustrating, but just keep at it. It's this has been, you find it in the freezer section near like puff pastry at your grocery store, or you can go to a local specialty market. So this has been sitting in our fridge for 24 hours and then at room temperature, still sealed, for about 2 hours. And you want to, if you're going to be walking away or not working as quickly, I recommend covering it with a clean tea towel or kitchen towel, because it will dry out. It's so delicate. So to begin, we're going to be putting 1 piece of phyllo down, and then I have a cup of olive oil that we're going to be using to drizzle in between the layers of phyllo. And I found that instead of using a pastry brush to brush either the oil or melted butter that you would use, that drizzling it makes extra crispy layers, because these parts that don't have the oil are going to puff extra, and then that'll be the super crisp crunch. And if you find that your phyllo is sticking, flip your stack over, because that might mean that one side is still thawing a little bit. 2. Olive oil. And because there is moisture content in butter, using olive oil is actually also going to create crispier layers. I'm going to do 4 layers for each, and then we're going to cut these in half. And this recipe will make you about 20 or 21 individual Spanakopita triangles. Just slice it right down the middle. And then you can use a 1/4 cup measure, or I have an ice cream scoop that's also a 1/4 cup. And we're gonna scoop beautiful filling. And just as a reminder, you're not going to be putting olive oil on the very last layer before you put your filling in. So, have your wonderful little first fold on each side. So we're going from our lower right corner up and folding to the left, just like that. Then, of course, olive oil. And just fold the lower left corner up, up, and we are squared off again. Again. Up. And now you can see that all of our sides have contained our luscious filling. If you're like me, you may not have to scoop more and more olive oil because it'll be all over your fingers, but you can just really get in there. And your final fold will be sealing up our little envelope, just like that. And then to season and garnish, we have some, I took fennel seeds and I lightly crushed them in a mortar and pestle. Some coarse finishing salt. And I have this Mediterranean spice blend called za'atar, which is wild thyme and sumac and sesame seeds, also some smoked paprika. And then just take a pastry brush and lightly spread out some olive oil. And then one of them will do za'atar. And one of them will do a little bit of the fennel. As you might have caught earlier, we're a black licorice loving family, and fennel is similar to the flavor profile of black licorice, so just another little way that I can play up all the things that my dad loves. And then if you're worried about clumps in your spices, I recommend using a fine sieve for an equal distribution. Put a little bit of that in there. Nice little blush. Okay, and these are ready. Our oven is still at 350 from cooking our pie. And I'm gonna finish rolling these and filling these bad boys up. And they're gonna go on a parchment lined half sheet pan for 30 to 35 minutes. And then the last 10 minutes of cooking, just move them to the top shelf so they get a really beautiful golden brown on top. I'll show you how to blend up our creamy sesame dressing that's gonna go all over our beautiful layered salad. And we used to always get the Annie's or Trader Joe's version of this sesame dressing, and that was always my dad's favorite, so I wanted to do kind of our own version. Beginning with 4 cloves of garlic, 1 tablespoon of lemon juice, 2 tablespoons of apple cider vinegar, 3 tablespoons of olive oil, and half teaspoon of salt, 1 teaspoon of fresh black pepper, 1 teaspoon of umami powder, Again, you can use a teaspoon of miso paste or liquid aminos with a pinch of sugar. You don't want to use the umami powder. And then blend that up just till the garlic is pulverized. You don't have to do this in a blender. You can always smash the garlic and cut it or grate it with a microplane and then whisk everything else together. This just makes it really quick. All right, and we have a half cup of tahini, sesame seed paste. I love tahini. And when it's blended with some kind of acid, it emulsifies and just it's light and creamy and so good. 1/4 cup of toasted sesame oil. And just make sure it's toasted. Don't use just regular because that toastiness is just gonna add an amazing, nutty, deep quality to our dressing with all these other bright flavors like the garlic and green onion. So this is just 1 scallion chopped, using the white and the green parts because I like the white. It's a little bit more sweet, and the green is more herbaceous. 1 or 2 teaspoons of fresh chives. And you can use all green onion or you can use all chives too. And then you want to blend this up, and we're going to be adding a little bit of water, just depending on the consistency. Some tahinis are thicker than others, so this might seize up pretty quick. Just depends on what you got.
As long as 1 and 1 is
And I actually probably would recommend not putting the green herbs in quite yet because our sesame dressing is a little greenish, but green creamy sesame dressing can add its own beauty. And here I have a 1/4 cup, and I'm using the broth from the marinated artichokes that we put in our spanakopita, but you can just use vegetable broth or just water is fine too, but maybe adjust your salt. And then 2 tablespoons of sesame seeds.
grow. Gonna paint the sign, so you always know.
This kind of sesame dressing was always what my dad would marinate vegetables in. And he would have different bowls for each vegetable so none of them got mixed together so we could enjoy them in their true character. But this dressing was always so good with barbecued veggies or even tofu. And one thing about whenever you blend tahini with any kind of liquid, it will start to, the chemical reaction of it seizes up. So you don't want to blend it too much, just until everything is creamy and incorporated. I like to still have a little bit of integrity with each of my sesame seeds too for a little crunch. Very nostalgic, very yummy. How many of you out there feel really nostalgic when you eat herby salad dressing? Just a little more water and a pinch more salt. Ooh, baby. This looks so creamy and perfect. And with all the layers of our crunchy vegetables, that kind of the deep roasted sesame flavor is gonna go really well. And set it aside and just let the flavors mingle for at least 30 minutes before serving it. And I'll show you how we're gonna layer up our salad. So I have a playground and a rainbow of vegetables just ready to be made into our perfect layered salad. I'm beginning with the rest of our greens from our spanakopita because that'll be the nice foundation that when we drizzle our creamy dressing all over everything, it's gonna soak into these greens and be the prize that everybody wants at the very end. And The great thing about layered salad is just use whatever you have. If you only have greens and tomatoes, just do layers of greens and tomatoes. Or if you don't have greens, then I'm using some purple cabbage. And this is a lovely salad on its own, but since the Spanakopita already has 2 pounds of greens in it, it might be nice to, have some other veggies. We would always have a big thing of layered salad. I remember it so vividly. Or sometimes fruit salad it's a good complement for Spanakopita too. So if you check out the mamula recipe, the mamula episode where I make the melon mint salad, that'd be a good pairing too. And then you can just kind of pick whatever you think looks good. You can check your progress if you have a clear bowl to make sure you can see each color. So that was our cucumber layer, and I made a little corona around. And then my mom always put water chestnuts, so I really like that. Just like a juicy crunch. And the really cool thing about water chestnuts is that they don't ever get soggy. There's water chestnuts just again in one single layer. Some grated carrots. They're just an amazing sweet addition to this salad. Plus, when you have one grated layer, it again is a nice vessel for capturing our dressing. I like to add a couple different, more real flavorful and different textural elements. So I have about a cup of marinated sliced mushrooms, and I marinated these overnight in my maple balsamic vinaigrette that you can learn how to make from the comfort food episode. And started out a full quart of mushrooms that I sliced, and then it shrinks down to about a cup. And then also I have a heaping cup of my mom's homemade pickled dilly beans. Go ahead and layer the beans down. And then I have some thinly sliced radishes. Add just a little bit of, just the slightest amount of heat. The other thing that this salad has to have, at least for my own nostalgic purposes, is frozen peas, which makes this so good for picnics because you can put the peas in and then go, and it keeps your salad cool, and then they're the perfect temperature by the time you're ready to eat. And then also sliced beets, pickled or just canned. I'm going to have our beets middle, mushrooms, a nice little ring of cherry tomatoes all around the top. And I wanted to put these on because they remind me of little bouncy balls, and one of the stories that just really sums up what kind of dad that my dad was when my brother and I were growing up was after the post office would close. My dad had and still has an extensive bouncy ball collection of all different sizes, big super balls that fly up hundreds of feet, or little teeny bouncy balls that you would get in like the gumball machines. And he kept them all in an empty baby wipe container. And it was always out on a shelf in the garage. And so we knew that when he was going to get that container that it was going to be a good night in the Enabnet household. So then he would take my brother and I to the post office after it closed and just dump out all the bouncy balls, so everybody's P.O. boxes were the perfect surface for everything to ricochet off. And yeah, you can have a lot of fun without spending any money. And that's also one thing that I really value, along with educating yourself and being a lifelong learner that I have learned from my parents, is that you can have a lot of fun, and it's important to know that it doesn't cost any money to have a wonderful time and make family memories. And making a salad that's very artistic also, I know, is important to my dad because he is an incredible artist, especially the medium of sculpting. So I felt like this was my sculpture that I could present. Well, that is a very beautiful salad, ready to be slathered with our sesame dressing. So, to go with our eclectic menu today, I have a strawberry margarita for the beverage. And I wanted to make this because I have another wonderful father figure in my life. Jason's dad, Mike, so my father-in-law, who lives down in California, he loves a strawberry margarita. So this is for you, Papa Mike. So take the juice of half of fresh orange, and then we're going to be using this to garnish, so just set that aside. 2.5 ounces of tequila, 1 ounce of orange liqueur like Grand Marnier or Cointreau, a heaping cup of, these are kind of half thawed strawberries. So you want them cold, maybe a little icy, but you want that juice in there to kind of blend up our ice. Because then we're going to add about a little scant of a cup, half of a mason jar of ice. Then just blend this all up till smooth.
You can have everything if you like.
And if you are looking for more of a flavor paired cocktail, I'd recommend using, if you used a good kind of bourbon in your pumpkin pie you made, I would recommend using that same bourbon to make an old fashioned or a Manhattan or any other kind of bourbon based cocktail. Or this whole meal would be great with a Chardonnay. Or the rainbow smoothie from my sushi episode. It would look really beautiful with the rainbow layered salad. But because I'm lucky enough to have another great dad in my life, I wanted to make sure and honor him. So we have a perfect, smooth, blended strawberry margarita. And I like to just put a slice of orange inside there. Voila. Our spread is done, ready to be enjoyed. Our creamy dressing, the flavors have mingled. It's ready to go on our layered salad. Our spanakopita, the inside unctuous, still warm, wrapped up in our light and perfectly crispy phyllo dough. And of course, our pumpkin pie is still just a little warm because I couldn't wait, but mostly cool enough. And of course, plenty of whipped cream to go on top. And it wouldn't really be honoring my dad if I didn't have a very special pairing. 100% blue agave tequila. It's very important that it's blue agave. 100%. Supposedly then, you don't get any hangover no matter what. It's all about being healthy when it comes to my dad. In these uncertain times, you can certainly make time for quarantine cooking. Remember, wash your hands and write your loved ones. I hope that all of you can find inspiration, whether it's from a father figure in your life or just a positive role model. so important to bring artistic creativity and imagination to the young people in our world, and I feel very lucky that my dad was one of those people for me. Cheers, Dad. Love you. Happy Father's Day.
Happiness runs, happiness runs, happiness runs, happiness runs. I took a look in